With another commitment over the weekend, LSU football is putting the entire college football world on notice with its 2025 recruiting class.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Happy Monday. Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, whatever your preferred podcast platform is. Plus, don't forget, we're also on YouTube, so you can listen and also watch the podcast. Just search Locked On LSU, hit that subscribe button, and you'll get notified as soon as new episodes of Locked On LSU drop. Today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on today to get started. All right, let's get into it because the 2025 recruiting class for LSU was absolutely stacked, and it just got even better over the weekend with the news of four-star Louisiana cornerback Jabori Antoine committing to the Tigers. So Jabori Antoine's from New Iberia, went to place at Westgate High School. He's the number 2 player in the state of Louisiana in the 2025 class and the number 8 corner overall in the 2025 class. Jabori Antoine had offers from Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ole Miss, Florida State, Texas A&M. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, this kid really could have had the pick of the litter of wherever he wanted to go in college football. And over the weekend, he officially committed to LSU. So over the weekend, this past weekend was junior days at LSU. So players committed in the 24 and 25 classes would come in and have meetings with coaches. And then players that are still actively being recruited by both LSU and schools across the country, they came to LSU kind of do the same thing. It was meeting with coaches, meeting with current players, tours of the facilities, essentially. And just another big weekend for coaches to get in front of players and players to get to know the coaches and the school and acclimate themselves with the facilities, and also to talk to other players that are being recruited by LSU or also that are already committed to LSU to kind of get a vibe for what that class might look like, maybe, build relationships both with the coaching staff and with other prospective players. So Jabori Antoine was in Baton Rouge this past weekend for Junior Day, and he came out of that weekend fully committed to the LSU Tigers. Now, I think that this commitment from Jabori Antoine is so massive for several different reasons. And I think it's indicative of several very important things as far as this LSU football program is concerned. But first and foremost, I'll start with what this means for the 2025 class, because I think that it is huge. And this 25 class, as we know, is absolutely stacked. First and foremost, you have the number 1 quarterback in that class, in the 2025 class, and Bryce Underwood. He's not only the number 1 quarterback, he's also the number 1 overall player in the 25 class. You have a commitment from DeCorian Moore, the number 1 wide receiver in the 2025 class, another 5-star. You also have a commitment from local kid, New Orleans kid, a Harlem Berry, 5-star running back, the number 1 running back in the 2025 class, and the number 1 player in the state of Louisiana committed in that class. So you already got 3 5-stars committed in the 25 class, but those 3 names that I just mentioned have one thing in common. They're all offensive players. Like you need defensive players as well. And as we all know, this cornerback room needs a lot of help and it needs it desperately. You don't really have time to wait until 2025, but we'll get into that, what that means for the cornerback room and what that means for the defense. But adding Jabori Antoine adds just that much more appeal into the 2025 class, and it adds that much more of of name recognition into the 2025 class. You're just absolutely stacking talent in that recruiting class. And right now, LSU has the number 3 overall class in the 2025 rankings. Honestly, I don't really know how that works. How you have the number 1 overall player and you have the number 1 player in 3 different position groups, and you're not the number 1 overall class. Notre Dame currently has the number 1 class because they have 9 4 stars committed and 0 5 stars. You have 3 5 stars and I believe 5 4 stars. So that puts Notre Dame above LSU in the rankings. But I think the important thing here is we're not going to live and die by rankings. You're not going to live and die by numbers. I know that it's really easy for all of us, especially now that there's no actual football happening, to kind of maybe get overwhelmed are carried away with the rankings and the stars, and this kid on this platform is rated as the number 2 position and number 2 player at that position. This website has him ranked as the number 3 player at that position. Don't get overwhelmed with that. Don't get all caught up with that, because it's going to change a lot. Not just the rankings, not just the stars, but also commitments change as well. As unfortunately, we are all very we all know that very, very well. So a lot is going to change from now until the time that those 2025 commits actually get on campus. So don't get too overwhelmed with that. But moral of the story is LSU has a heck of a lot of talent coming in that 2025 class. One, at positions of need, and two, at positions that are stacked right now, but are going to need to add depth and are going to need to add starters once you start to kind of cycle out, and the unit that you have now, the roster that you have now, starts to either transfer or enter the NFL draft. So I think first and foremost, you look at this 2025 class and you have every single reason to be incredibly excited. Just a reminder, you still got a 2024 season to go through. You still need to get those players signed and to sign their national letters of intent. So a lot of time until you actually start to see the fruits of the recruiting labor, until you actually start to get those players on campus and you start to see their commitments on the field in the 2025 seasons and beyond. But I think the important thing is you're laying the groundwork and you're starting to see this foundation that Brian Kelly has talked about, that, hey, we've built the foundation. Now we start to ascend. You're starting to see that ascension. But there's several other reasons why I think that this commitment from Jabori Antoine is massive. And we will get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number 1 ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Plus, we are also part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. And speaking of the Locked On Network, very exciting things happening over with Locked On. We've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. So go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, over the weekend, LSU landed a commitment from 4-star corner in the 2025 class, Jabori Antoine, a Louisiana kid. Goes to Westgate High School in New Iberia. He's the number 2 player in the state of Louisiana, the number 8 ranked cornerback in the 2025 class. First and foremost, that's massive to continue to add talent, defensive talent, and in-state talent in that 2025 class. So Jabori Antoine will join Harlem Berry, Bryce Underwood, Decorian Moore, and also Keelan Moses in the 2025 class, another in-state four-star defensive player in that recruiting class. So I think that's one thing. It's just you're just stacking talent. You're building for the future. The other thing that I think is really key here, and it kind of alludes to what I just mentioned, is it's a massive testament to how Brian Kelly and this entire coaching staff and recruiting staff has been able to recruit the state of Louisiana and continues to lock down the state of Louisiana. That was probably my biggest and probably your biggest and maybe just the college football world's biggest skepticism of bringing in Brian Kelly, a quote unquote outsider, somebody with zero relationship or ties to the state of Louisiana and to the Southeast, to the SEC, was how could he recruit the state of Louisiana? How could Brian Kelly recruit the Southeast? Well, I think that not just Jabori Antoine's commitment, but looking at the 24 and 25 classes, how could you not say that he has absolutely positively locked down the state of Louisiana, probably better than any other coach other than Nick Saban? Because that was the big push for Nick Saban. That was his big campaign, was locking down the state of Louisiana. The past regime didn't do a very good job of that. And we saw a ton of Louisiana talent get out of the state of Louisiana and go places like Texas A&M, go places like Alabama. And it absolutely killed LSU that they didn't have that lockdown of the state, that they let in-state talent go elsewhere. That is absolutely positively unacceptable. So Jabori Antoine, the number two player in the state of Louisiana, committed to LSU. That's what needs to happen. The top players in the state need to go to LSU. As you look at the 2024 class, 10 of the top 11 players in the state of Louisiana are going to LSU. Wardell Mack is the lone exception, and he's headed to Texas. 10 of the top 11 players in the state are coming to LSU. In 2025, 3 of the top 5 players in the state of Louisiana that have committed are committed to LSU. Those 2 players that have not committed in the top 5 are projected to commit to LSU. So right now, you're projected to land 5 of the top 5 in-state players in the 2025 class. Now, it's 2025, not a lot of players have committed, so there's still a lot of work to be done there. There's still a lot of players ranked in the top 10, top 15 in the state in that class that don't even have a projection yet, just because you are pretty considerably far out. But I think that that is huge. That this coaching staff, this recruiting staff has been able to lock down the state. And the other important thing here, too, is from all the research that I've done, from all of the people that I've talked to, Jabori Antoine was not one of those absolute ride or die for LSU. Like, I'm 100% going to be a Tiger. It's been my dream my entire life to go to LSU kind of kids. Because I think that LSU absolutely benefits from that. There is no single flagship university more important to its state than LSU is to Louisiana. And this football program benefits from that. That there are kids across the state of Louisiana, 4 stars and 5 stars, that don't care about any other offers that are coming in. They want to go to LSU. Everything that I've heard is that he wasn't necessarily like that. Not that he didn't want to go to LSU, not that he was anti LSU, but he was completely open to going out of state. But you were able to reel him in and keep him locked down in the state of Louisiana, even when I'm sure there was NIL offers, and I know for certain there were offers from places like Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Michigan, so on and so forth. That you were able to put the full court press on and sell to him LSU. So I think that's huge. So it's one stacking talent in the 25 class, building an absolute unit in that class, locking down the state of Louisiana, bringing in the number 2 player in the state. Number 3 is I think that this is huge for starting to see the ball rolling on defensive backs, on homegrown defensive backs. Because Brian Kelly said from the jump, we don't want to have to rely on the transfer portal. Of course, we're going to use it to supplement our roster, but we want to build our team with players that we recruit, with players that we start relationships with very early on, and we bring them in, and they are homegrown LSU, whether they're in-state players or not. They want to build talent from the jump. They don't want to have to bring in talent or build a roster via the transfer portal. The transfer portal, per Brian Kelly, should be supplementary. I think that you've started to see that at a lot of position groups, that you don't necessarily need to go out into the transfer portal at wide receiver. You don't necessarily need to go out into the transfer portal at other positions. That you supplement the quarterback room with AJ Swan via the transfer portal. That you can supplement the wide receiver room with CJ Daniels from Liberty. And every single year, I think you're going to need those supplements via the transfer portal. But you shouldn't have to rely on the transfer portal to field a team of 22. That hasn't necessarily been the case with the DBs and more specifically the corners. That every year since Brian Kelly has been here, this upcoming season not excluded, you need to go to the transfer portal simply to have enough starters. Like simply to have at least a little bit of experience to feel good about this cornerback room. You needed to get into the transfer portal. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You simply would not have had enough corners had you not gone into the transfer portal. I think that with this commitment from Jabori Antoine, you're starting to see now, okay, now this is a destination place for high school cornerbacks. That now young corners want to come to LSU for their careers, to be developed at LSU, and ideally not just commit to LSU, but sign with LSU, get to LSU, develop at LSU, and contribute at LSU. That's really been the problem over the past couple of years. Your roster was so barren of defensive back talent once Brian Kelly took over. Well, you had to rebuild that cornerback room via the transfer portal. Then a majority of those players left, so you had to rebuild again via the transfer portal. And LSU got so little production out of their players, for their corners from the transfer portal. Deuce Chestnut didn't get much from him. Denver Harris got virtually nothing from him. So I know Inside Alexander, of course, you got contribution from him before the injury, but overall, you didn't get as much from your transfer corners as you probably expected. Just as an overall blanket statement, you cannot continue to go down that road. You cannot continue to just hope that these corners that you get through the transfer portal are going to come to fruition, or their behavioral or attitude problems aren't going to rear its ugly head. That you need to bring in your own guys. And now that's not going to help LSU in 2024. I don't know if Jabori Antoine's going to be a day one starter as a true freshman in 2025, but what I do think, and I highly doubt that he is going to, again, I always say you cannot rely on true freshmen being starters day one or even being consistent contributors in their true freshman season. It just simply is not fair. And you're setting yourself and them up for failure if you're going to do that. But what I do think it signifies is a shift at the cornerback position, that now you're starting to bring in talent from the jump, that you're starting to bring in high school talent and develop that talent. That by the time 2025 comes around and Jabori Antoine gets on campus, you see guys like um whoever it might be on this staff, on this roster right now, like a Javian Toviano, for example. That those players have kind of been that first wave of the homegrown talent, and it continues to just kind of be like a plug and play. One guy goes to the NFL, you got a couple more guys coming in through that upcoming class, so on and so forth. So you're starting to see that come to fruition at the cornerback position, and you're not done. Like just signing one is not nearly enough, but it starts to get the ball rolling, and it's a massive commitment at that position, and of course from an in-state kid. Coming up next, I want to get into also one one expectation that I set for Corey Raymond, LSU secondary coach, and what kind of box that just checked. Plus, a 5-star on his way to visit LSU. What does LSU need to do in that visit to get this player to commit? We'll get into that coming up next after a couple of words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and of course, placing some super bets. I think that you would be foolish to not place a bet on at least a Travis Kelsey anytime touchdown score. And hey, if you want an even bigger payout, go ahead and play and put a little bit of money on the first touchdown scorer of the game to be Travis Kelsey. That's what we saw in the AFC Championship game this past weekend, and that is what I am going to be putting my money on. But FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a dub or two or three, even if it's not a Travis Kelsey anytime touchdown score. Check out all of the bets available on FanDuel because you can bet on not only who will win Super Bowl 58, but also FanDuel has bets for which players will score a touchdown, like Travis Kelsey, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. That's fanduel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are rolling along here at Locked On LSU. Jabori Antoine, a four-star corner in the 2025 class, has committed to LSU, just joining all of the star-studded talent in that 2025 class. Bryce Underwood, five-star quarterback. Decorian Moore, five-star wide receiver. Harlem Berry, five-star running back. Keelan Moses, a four-star linebacker from U High in Baton Rouge. The list goes on and on. I think this is also a, a big get for Corey Raymond. When LSU hired Corey Raymond, I was incredibly skeptical, and I remain skeptical because Corey Raymond's secondaries over the last 4 seasons have been less than desirable, and I think that's an understatement. The defense at LSU in 2020 was horrendous. The secondary at LSU in 2021 wasn't much better. I think it was ranked 70th, somewhere around there, 70th in pass defense. He goes to Florida in 2022. In his last 2 seasons at Florida, the defenses were bad. I mean, like, we saw Jaden Daniels throw for almost 400 against that Florida secondary. That Corey Raymond's secondaries, frankly, have not been very good. But the one thing that gave me optimism of bringing back Corey Raymond, the one thing that I did not disagree with in the slightest, was what Corey Raymond was going to do to the recruitment side of things. Recruiting defensive backs, recruiting some of the best defensive back talent in the country. And I needed to see a few things from Corey Raymond in order for that skepticism to wane. First and foremost, it was development from the young guys. It was getting more out of the veterans that you hadn't gotten before. And the third thing was bring in the best talent in the country, whether that's in the 24 class, whether it's in this year's transfer portal window, whether it's 25, 26 and beyond. Part of the reason why you are coming back is to recruit the top cornerback and DB talent in the country, then you need to do that. You need to bring in some of the best DBs in the country. And Jabori Antoine feels like to me Corey Raymond's first big fish, and that there's probably more to come. That I have to, and I don't know exactly who Jabori Antoine talked to at junior days. I don't know exactly how those meetings went, but I have a feeling that Corey Raymond had a whole heck of a lot to do with it, as well as this entire new LSU defensive coaching staff. Blake Baker, new defensive coordinator, had a lot to do with that as well. But Corey Raymond's claim to fame is the relationships that he builds, and especially the relationships that he builds in the full court presses that he puts on for young DBs. So I'm still skeptical of Corey Raymond as secondary coach, just given recent history. This is a what have you done for me lately league. But in terms of Corey Raymond as a recruiter, you came in here and you did what you needed to do. Now the job's not done, but you got one down. and it's a pretty big one at that. When it comes to big ones, you got a big one coming up, a big visit coming up on Wednesday. Terry Bussey is a 5-star overall athlete, two-way player. He can play DB, he can play receiver, who was originally committed to Texas A&M in the 2024 class. He decommitted when Jimbo Fisher got fired, and he's been kind of taking a bit of a free agency tour. He was in Athens this past weekend, and from what I've been told, Kirby Smart, his pitch to Terry Bussey was, look, we're going to bring you in as a DB, and then we'll start to work you into the offensive game plan. What Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, told us and told me, told the show, is that Terry Bussey wants to play receiver. He's being recruited as a DB. That the school that is most likely to land Terry Bussey is a team that is at least promising the possibility of being able to play both sides or to get more reps at receiver. Now, Corey Raymond, I have to believe, is probably going to be the primary recruiter of Terry Bussey, just given, his reputation as such an excellent recruiter. I will find it very interesting if that is a promise that perhaps Brian Kelly and his coaching staff are willing to make, or at least something that they're willing to entertain. If they are not, if they only view him as a defensive player and he only wants to go somewhere where he can get a shot at playing offensively, then look, that's fine. And if you don't see him in that role and you're not willing to make promises that you can't keep and he gets out the door, then so be it. Then that is what it is. But Terry Bussey will visit LSU on Wednesday. I'm sure he'll have, do the car wash. He'll have meetings with Brian Kelly. He'll have meetings with coordinators and coaches, and I believe with Corey Raymond as well. So Terry Bussey, 5-star athlete, two-way player from the state of Texas, will be in the building on Wednesday. So we'll keep an eye on that. And coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, we'll continue to take a look at some new personnel changes, not necessarily on the coaching staff, but with LSU football as a whole. And I also wanted to entertain this question. Where in the pecking order does Brian Kelly fall in the rankings of SEC coaches in 2024 once Brent Venables and Steve Sarkisian enter the conference? We'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU. Plus, we're bringing back Mailbag Wednesdays. I know we've lost it a little bit throughout the season, and then the craziness of National Signing Day, and then coaching changes, transfer portal. A lot has gone on, so we have abandoned Mailbag Wednesday here for a while, but it is coming back. So get those questions in for a Mailbag Wednesday. You can comment them down below. And even if it's not a question, if you just have a comment that you want me to entertain, I can give my reaction and my thoughts on it. So you can comment those below on the YouTube channel. You can also send them in via Twitter at Locked On LSU or my personal Twitter at Caroline Fenton1. All of that coming up on the next few editions of Locked On LSU.